I would say it's a lovely evening, but we're not quite sure at this point in time if it is or isn't. It's been coming and going all day, so welcome again to this evening at the board table. I'll just read this. The Greater Victoria School District wishes to recognize and acknowledge the Esquimalt and Songhees nations on whose traditional territories we live, we learn, and we do our work. We'll be getting to our presentations in just a minute. We've got a few housekeeping things to do here. First, can I have approval of the agenda, please? Thank you. Approval of the minutes of Monday, April the 8th. Thank you very much. Any business arising from the minutes? Thank you. We have 3 presenters on our schedule tonight. We've had an addition of Tammy Jeske under 4C. We will attempt to, well, I'll say when we will have a relaxed 5-minute presentation from each of the presenters. And because I'm saying relaxed, I'm still going to keep you on some kind of a time frame, but I think there'll be lots of discussion arising from the presentations. We want to make sure we have enough time for that. So we will be looking at the clock and advising you when we think that it's time for the next presenter. So if I could welcome Dr. Crofton and Dr. Blank. Welcome, thank you.
Thank you. Yes, actually someone told me that we had 10 minutes, so I'll talk extra fast. I work with a group called Doctors for Safer Schools, and we are concerned that officials like you have the most up-to-date information so that you can make these decisions based on the current science. How do I? Okay. Yes? Is that close enough? Okay, and someone's advancing the slides.
Then you know when you want to advance it.
Okay, and wanted to give just a very quick review of an update of the landscape where we are. As you probably know, we're in the phase what I call the gray, the kind of the debating, denying the evidence phase. We don't have scientific consensus, as you well know. One of the concerns is by the time people say, why aren't people getting sick? Well, in fact, there is a lot of evidence that people are getting sick from Wi-Fi exposure. They don't know always how to connect the dots. Our concern is that we'll be in repairing the damage phase. We acknowledge the educational advantages. Certainly kids today need to be tech savvy. We know the medical advantages of this radiation, but the simple question we would pose to you, why not choose the safest options for this technology? And one of the concerns is that children, particularly on iPads, Katerina Gustav, who's a leading technical expert in Europe and in North America, is going to be here and speak afterwards, and she will explain to you what the concerns are, particularly with Wi-Fi based devices and young children. So we're concerned about the radio frequency, the microwave radiation that comes from cell towers, cell phones, and Wi-Fi, as well as the magnetic fields which come from power lines and plugged-in devices. I'm not going to go through this slide because since I prepared this, I found out that Ms. Gustav was going to be here and talking about what we call the safer tech solutions. There's something called the precautionary principle. So I'm sure you've had lots of meetings and you have lots of information about Wi-Fi. But we are not asking you to make a decision on whether it's healthy or unhealthy, but to look and see if there is enough science to support the view that we would use the precautionary principle. This is very quickly some of the biological effects. This damage can happen at these very low levels, non-thermal, non-ionizing, at a fraction below what Health Canada Safety Code 6 allows. These are published, peer-reviewed studies. If you want the reference for these, I'm happy to provide them. And Dr. Blank, who's here with me and who will speak in a moment, is a researcher. He's been doing research in this field for many, many years at Columbia University. So, as I said, one of the concerns I have is that we are relying on what the World Health Organization is telling us, what IARC is telling us, Health Canada is telling us, but you're maybe not hearing, for example, this physician was treating thousands of electrosensitive patients. And there are now children and in fact staff. I get emails from teachers all over the country who are electrosensitive, now unable to work. We're going to see this as a growing problem. That you can have not only electro-hypersensitivity, but also a possibility of electro-allergic. So prenatal exposure is also a concern. So we're hoping that you will consider putting a protocol together that uses this technology more safely, and I would strongly encourage you to think about prenatal exposure. So it's not just the students that are at risk, but also the staff. The cardiologist I work with has called this the new cardiac risk factor. So the Wi-Fi radiation affects the heart. As you know, the heart is electrical in nature and is particularly vulnerable to these fields. I asked Dr. Blank, I said, are we dealing with the new tobacco? He said, no, actually we're more like dealing with the new asbestos. So if you're waiting for Health Canada to change, if you're waiting for all the international health regulatory bodies to change, we may be putting our children at risk for a lot longer than we should. This shows the delay between when a harmful agent was identified and when there was some action taken. With asbestos, for example, 2006, Health Canada started cautioning, but it wasn't until the end of 2012 that Canada stopped exporting asbestos. So we have here, supportive of these positions, Health Canada, certainly the industry, and the World Health Organization. Local health authorities, I know you have letters and documents from local health authorities telling you that there's no conclusive evidence that the Wi-Fi radiation is harmful. But the landscape has changed since then, and hopefully they have taken a look at some of the science. There are many independent physicians and researchers, Dr. Blank is one of them, who are calling for international standards that are based on biological levels. Although you've heard a lot about this topic for a long time, I'm sure, but one of the key things to remember is the difference between thermal and non-thermal. Health Canada's standards are only based on thermal level of exposure, as one of their scientists recently acknowledged, which is what many people have been saying all along. In other words, Safety Code 6 that you and many people are calling upon to rely to protect the health of children, staff, and schools are totally irrelevant to Wi-Fi exposure. The World Health Organization position is also changing. They have reclassified, as I'm sure you know, Wi-Fi and radio frequency radiation has been reclassified to 2B. And this comes from one of their documents. Radio frequency radiation includes not only mobile phones, but Wi-Fi as well. So this, I'm sure you have heard already that it's possibly carcinogenic to humans. But this statement was a good example of people who were very supportive and are promoting Wi-Fi in schools, said, well, the World Health Organization actually hedged their bets, and at the end they said there wasn't conclusive evidence. This is, actually this wasn't in March, this was in April of this year, and I have this reference. This is something you should look up, because now the World Health Organization is not only saying that it's 2B, possibly carcinogenic, they are also saying now, this is the strongest statement the World Health Organization, IARC, has made, is that there are positive associations between the exposure and cancer. So where will we be in 5 years? Will it be probably carcinogenic? In 10 years, will it be known human carcinogenic? So there are many, if you take a proactive stance here, there are many public health officials who are calling for removal of Wi-Fi, because it's harmful, as this Dr. Moskowitz says, at government-sanctioned levels. This is the cardiologist that I work with on our Doctors for Safer Schools. He's very concerned about incidents of children, some with no previous cardiac history, having symptoms within Wi-Fi. Just about to finish, this is a public official in a town in France who said, citing the precautionary principle, we have removed wireless networks and installed fiber optics. Our job is to protect people's health, especially the children. So, in summary, yes, we need the technology. There are so many ways to use it effectively. The data is safe and secure, as are the users. So I would like to introduce Dr. Blank. As I said, one of the reasons why I was delighted that he was able to come here this evening is because instead of referencing, as I have done, the World Health Organization or IARC or Health Canada, I'd like you to ask a few questions, if you would, of one of the scientists who's been working in this field for many years. Dr. Blank. And he has no slides.
Well, I was told that I shouldn't prepare a statement, but I'd be willing to answer unless you want me to make a statement, which I'll make one. Yes.
So if I could just clarify then, rather than a presentation, you'd like to answer questions?
No, I'm here at your convenience. If you want me to make a short presentation, I'll be glad to do so. It's the only time.
Well, it's up to you, but certainly it might frame the questions if you said, you know, a short couple of minutes about what you. I'm not quite sure. I'm not going to put words into your mouth. Do whatever you feel comfortable.
Okay, let me just make a couple of statements, and we'll see how it goes from there. One of the things about EMF, electromagnetic fields, is that you don't sense them. They are around. I have, when I give a talk, I give a slide which shows people holding up a large fluorescent bulb under a power line, and the bulb is lit. That means that there's a big voltage drop across that, and that voltage comes from the current that's flowing in the power line, generating a magnetic field, which will then generate a voltage, or there will be an electric field there as well. These things are there, and the people are not feeling it. The problem is that this is a force that by the time you do feel it, it's real bad. You can't really, you become oversensitive. There are people who are living in a community in West Virginia where the radio telescope is mounted for astronomical observation, and that cannot tolerate any electromagnetic interference. So people find that they can go there and live like more or less normal lives. But when they leave that area, they all have these awful symptoms. And that's sort of an end stage when people cannot really survive in an area where they have these electromagnetic fields. You cannot feel them until it's too late. It's a real bad disease, it's a bad condition, it's just awful when it hits. Now the kids, they're pretty insensitive to lots of things. You see the way they bounce up from falling, they heal quickly when things happen, but some healing does not occur. One of the things that was done, there was a recent study that was done, started about 50 years ago in Berkeley, done by Dr. Lee. And he was studying the effects of these fields, these were low-frequency fields, on pregnant women, and found that you can induce miscarriages. Now, this was not too surprising because the level was fairly high that did it. But the fact is, he then followed the children, and he knew the exposures of the mothers during pregnancy. He followed the children after they were born. And he's now published 2 papers, one showing that there's an increase in obesity. These children who are now about 10 to 13, something like that, and an increase in these kind of reading problems like autism and things like that. And so there are obviously consequences that occur. And by the way, these correlated with the level of exposure of the mothers. So this is a long-term study. Nobody expected it. It was nice that he did it. we have done stuff on the molecular level. We found that it takes very, very little signal to cause the DNA in a cell to break apart. The DNA is made up of two chains that are intertwined, and they are held together by chemicals that are really a code. You read the chemicals in sequence and they tell you how to add amino acids to make a protein. So they really have to come apart to keep the body functioning, because the body has to keep making proteins. Well, we find very, very low signals of low frequency, ELF, power frequency, this kind of stuff that turns on the lights, and radio frequency, the kind of stuff that turns on a Wi-Fi system. Both of them turn on, and they turn on, the low frequency one turns it on at a level that is 1,000,000 times lower than the level that Health Canada says is harmless. Now, I'm not saying anything about harmless or harmful, but this is a reaction that is occurring at a level that Health Canada does not recognize. It's the same level that if it occurred at radio frequency, Health Canada would say, we have to regulate this because this is at a thermal level. So DNA reacts very differently. DNA has the code and it's got to be maintained. And there was a very interesting paper published not too long ago in Nature, which is one of the top journals that natural. That was done in Iceland. Iceland has an unusual population. It's very homogeneous. And they have these gene histories of people that, families that go back a long way and that are interrelated. And they did a study on children and the DNA in the children and the DNA in their parents, the DNA of the fathers and the mothers. And they found that they could match the errors in DNA, the mutations in the children to the parents, most of them. But some of the children had their own that came along. But most of the most surprising part of this whole thing was that the mothers seemed to have the same number of mutations regardless of age, whereas the fathers had more and more mutations. When I say mutation, I mean errors in DNA that will result in problems of making proteins later on. In other words, these are mistakes that occur in the code. Why is that so? Baby girls, infant girls, are born with all their eggs. Their eggs mature regularly once they reach puberty, and that's the regular female cycle. Males, on the other hand, are born with spermatocytes. And spermatocytes, when they mature, they start to make sperm cells. So each time you get sperm cells being made, and they're made throughout mature life, they're being made by a cell that is resident in this individual all the time. And it's a target for whatever is around. So this target is being bombarded by whatever's around, and this is the one that's building up mutations. The Iceland study has pointed out, and you can look this up, I'm sure you find it on the internet. It's the Nature study, Iceland study, the DNA of fathers, and you see that fathers accumulate DNA mutations just by living. That is coming about as a result of exposure to the atmosphere. They're not getting it by breathing, they're not getting it. They're getting it because we're just living and exposed to the kinds of things that cause DNA damage. DNA damage has been shown by people who have taken Henry Lai, who is from the University of Washington but is now retired, did an experiment which showed that you can get DNA breaking up as a result of exposure to both power frequency and radio frequency like Wi-Fi. And those are at fairly high levels. But we showed with the stress protein synthesis that you can get the DNA to react even at very low levels. And every time the DNA reacts, there's always the possibility of a mutation, or let's say an error coming in, which may develop into a mutation. There aren't that many mutations, but you don't need very many to cause big problems. Anyway, I'm going on and on, so I'm going to just wind up and say that the evidence that we have is substantial. The evidence is epidemiological. The evidence is laboratory evidence. The laboratory evidence is being ignored by Health Canada under the idea that we do experiments that do not involve thermal change. That is a false It's a false accusation. It's the most relevant evidence you can get. And I think when you start tying it in with the DNA, you're tinkering not only with the lives of individuals, but with the lives of the species. Because if we start to accumulate too many, we may go the way of the dinosaurs.
Don't leave because we want to.
So I'm just going to take leave and talk with my fellow trustees here. We have 3 presenters who I believe are all on the same topic. It's a question of, do we break it down per questions for this one, and then I think we should go through all 3 presentations and then maybe entertain questions of all of the presenters, if that's all right. So we're going to, thank you very much. Because I believe that some of the questions may be answered, maybe may generate more. If we could welcome Katerina Gustav. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak here tonight and being able to expand on how to install a Wi-Fi network more safely. Since I was here the last time, 2 months ago, the French National Assembly adopted a bill about school reform that included a lot of e-learning tools and materials. And one of the statements was that the precautionary principle should be followed, and whenever possible, wired networks should be favored. Just a week ago, the BC Confederation of Parent Advisory Councils adopted a recommendation to install on and off switches with Wi-Fi routers, and also to follow protocol to save energy and minimize the RF exposure. Already 10 years ago, State University in Lower Saxony in Germany issued a Wi-Fi policy that made sure that the ambient RF levels were kept low while the technology was being used. That policy is still in place. To give you an idea, for 2.4 gigahertz, which most of the Wi-Fi networks operate on, Health Canada allows 10 million microwatts per square meter. That's a lot. On this slide, on the left-hand side, you can see the insert. It shows the natural background. That's almost 1 trillion times difference. As far as precautionary guidelines go, usually they start at around 1,000 microwatts per square meter. The Council of Europe is the Association of European Ministers. In 2011, they issued a resolution on the dangers of electromagnetic fields. There they recommend to design cell phone networks and any other wireless networks to not exceed 1,000 microwatts per square meter for ambient levels, which technically is totally possible. And medium term, this level should be even lower to 100 microwatts per square meter. In Austria, they also have a green building standard like LEED. We have out here in North America. LEED unfortunately does not include the electromagnetic quality of our living and work environments. In Austria it does, and you get the highest score if you find a location or design the building in a way that the ambient exposure levels don't exceed 10 microwatts per square meter. And the Austrian Medical Association, comparable to the Canadian Medical Association, has an EMF working group and considers 0.1 microwatts per square meter within normal limits. Now, if a Wi-Fi network is installed, the first thing you want to do is to place the access points away from students and staff. In a classroom, if the Wi-Fi router up there was on the desk of the teacher would get a totally unnecessary amount of exposure. And with an RF meter, when you install that kind of systems, you can find out which would be the best place for lowest ambient exposure. For energy saving reasons, any Wi-Fi router should actually come with power level adjustment. Unfortunately, they don't yet. You really have to search them out or have them individually programmed. If you already have a Wi-Fi router, which cannot be adjusted, there's always the possibility, as you can see on the picture, to put shielding over the external antennas. If it's a router without external antennas, if they are in sight, you can fit shielding around the unit to lower the exposure, and the network would still work. You don't need that much radiation. And also, each classroom, if there's a Wi-Fi router, should have a power on and off switch, so a teacher has a choice. It's much more difficult to reduce your exposure while you actually use the Wi-Fi with a tablet or laptop. The trouble is, tablets are built to have really close to the body, but you want to keep them at arm's length at all times, and especially children. I was talking to the Radiation Protection Branch today here in BC, and they were not aware that, for example, the iPad has 4 different Wi-Fi antennas in there. Each single one is compliant with safety code 6, but when all 4 of them, which they usually emit radiation, they couldn't answer that question, so I'll report back once Health Canada has decided how this compliance is calculated. Also, many wireless devices have a lot of other transmitters for GPS or Bluetooth on a laptop, so teach the students which transmitters are turned on and how they can disable them, so they only turn the antenna on which they're actually using at a given time. Also, any tablet the school district purchases should have the option of an adapter. iPad unfortunately does not have this option, but many of the PC tablets have the option of an Ethernet adapter, which means that, at least for the homework at home, a student would have the option to use a wired connection, which with iPad is not possible. And there are also schools which do have Ethernet ports, which could be used with them. In order to know what the levels are and to adjust a Wi-Fi system, you would need a meter, something like this. I would recommend a meter that is very sensitive, so it can actually measure the ambient levels, because RF meters that can measure compliance for safety code 6 usually only measure such high fields that you would not be able to adjust the Wi-Fi network for precautionary levels. You also want to monitor the peak levels, which usually show biological activity instead of the average levels. Safety code 6 requires only average level because it only looks at how much the body is heated. Also, you could make a kit for physics teachers, so to put students at work and learn about their environment, because they are using these devices and they should learn what they emit and how they can use them more safely. But the safest choice is wired connections, no matter what. Thank you.
So we would welcome any questions that you might have for us.
So we still have one more presentation,
Okay.
sorry, and then we'll come for
Oh,
questions.
okay, sorry.
Thank you. If I could welcome Tammy Jetsky. Thank you, Tammy.
Thank you. I appreciate just this. Had some great presentations. I just wanted to add, because obviously we're here about the motion that Trustee Deborah Noor is presented regarding the RF meter and measuring of levels. I just wanted to, in the resolution, it points out access points and routers. I just wanted to also bring attention to, as we've heard, the actual device itself, and making sure that the devices that the children will actually be holding in close proximity to the body, that the near field measurements are also included in that. Obviously that's what we're concerned about, is the you know, in that close proximity, what the levels are. We've heard about how Health Canada and our Safety Code 6 has really been challenged internationally by many experts as being obsolete and really not even applying to Wi-Fi, as it only, Safety Code 6 only includes protection against thermal acute effects and not the non-thermal biological effects that we're concerned about. So it's really important that, even taking into account that measurements may be within Health Canada Safety Code 6, that certainly by peer-reviewed science have been shown to be very dangerous, especially to children. So I think not only should we be measuring at the very minimum to ensure that standards are being adhered to, federal standards are being adhered to, but I think really we should be striving for to get levels as low as possible. That really, the protection of children and staff, teachers is paramount, and we don't want to just go for the minimum. We want to be as low as possible, and as pointed out, the safest solution is hardwired technology. There's a place really for technology in schools. Many of the devices, as Katarina pointed out, can be used in a hardwired capacity. It just takes forethought before the purchasing of items to ensure that that has the capability of doing both. The iPad, I just, one last little point about the iPad, is if you look in the instructions, in the manual instructions, it states, first and foremost, that you need to read all safety information, this is in quote, below, and operating instructions before using iPad to avoid injury. So just to put in the minds of the committee, there's a lot of unanswered questions as far as who's going to be overseeing the responsibility of ensuring that safety instructions are actually read and understood, who will be responsible for ensuring that children are using them according to instructions and keeping them at arm's length. Who's going to be in charge of that? I think it's an important question going forward. And also, as many of you know, some of us parents here have children who are electromagnetic sensitive, who develop very ill symptoms when they're exposed to this Wi-Fi for a prolonged period. And it's imperative that we monitor for effects in schools. It's not just enough to be measuring levels of radiation, but also monitoring for adverse effects in our students and teachers, and having an option for them, if this is the case, where they can go and be healthy and feel good. Again, I just point out the mission statement on School District 61's wall there, you know, that learning within a responsible and safe environment is paramount to you, and I think there are some things that this school board could do to really show that this is they want to put actions behind their words there. And that's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I'm just going to put a little bit of context here before we take questions from the trustees. This was not scheduled to be a Wi-Fi meeting. This is not the Wi-Fi committee. So what has happened is there has been a couple of presenters asked to speak to our regular operations meeting. Then there's been flyers sent out saying who was presenting, and then a lot of people have come to the meeting, which is great to hear some information. But this in no way was going to be a decision about Wi-Fi tonight. I'm just clarifying that that is not why we're here. We're taking in some information that's been presented, but this is not the body of people who are making Wi-Fi decisions tonight. This is our regular committee meeting. So just wanted that clarification so that at the end of the day, if there's not motions and not a bunch of things happening, you don't think it was all for naught, because that's coming, I'm not quite sure, at one point in time in a couple of months, but we're not at that point yet, so just wanted to give you folks some clarification. So do I have any questions for our speakers? Trustee Ferris.
Thank you, Madam Chair. While we're not here to make decisions tonight, I certainly appreciate the presentations, and particularly for somebody like myself, appreciated the nuts and bolts presentation of Ms. Gustavs. I think information that all of us can kind of take home and talk to our families about. So that's all good stuff, and I think that that'll be information that I'm sure that our committee will be taking into account in terms of reflecting on what the district should or should not be doing. So I'd just like to thank all of you who spoke tonight. It's much appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Nord.
Thank you. I would also like to express my appreciation to our speakers. This is an emerging technology, and it is something, well, it's been around for maybe since the 1940s or 50s, or even before that, as household use. It's just emerging in North America, really, in a very short period of time. And then all of a sudden, it has exploded into our schools, and there are so many different aspects to how we approach the health and safety of this issue, as well as we see the potential for in providing opportunities in an academic and scholastic way. It's an interesting situation because we have Wi-Fi in all our middle schools and all of our high schools already, and it's ubiquitous, and yet we are just now learning about the biological health implications of the non-thermal aspect of Wi-Fi. And I found it extremely interesting and compelling to read some of the research and to hear again what you've said tonight. So one of my questions would be, at the 1,000 microwatts per square meter as a precautionary level, would that allow for the effective use of technology in our schools? So that would be my first question I'd like to ask.
Well, the 1,000 microwatt per square meter threshold level would be for ambient levels. As soon as you have a laptop or iPad in your lap, it'll be much higher. But
So when you're
the
using
first
it?
step, yes.
So ambient is almost at rest.
Yeah, but when you use this technology, at least you would get a break when you're not directly with the device. So if it's carelessly done, then you would have this kind of exposure throughout the classrooms all day long. And the idea is to do the router design in a way to save energy and to keep the ambient level as low as possible.
So maintain the ambient level as low as possible, but while in use, you would have much higher levels.
Yes, always, which is why I recommend wired for the long term. But if you have for certain mobile applications short term, then it's extremely important to teach the students not to have it that close to the body.
Mm-hmm. So I have another question too.
Yeah.
So the routers or access points that are put into our schools and our middle schools and high schools at this point, does the company that does it have any responsibility to ensure that it's at the Health Canada levels?
Yes,
Are
they
they
do.
able to adjust it down?
Yes, they do, and they usually need that.
But the Health Canada
But as you-
levels are irrelevant to the biological.
Yeah, the Health Canada protects from actual electrical shock and burns and heating of the tissue. That's what it's there for. And it does its job in this regard. But it does not necessarily protect from long-term effects. Because this type of radiation is able, just like junk food, to cause a lot of oxidative stress in the human body, and then depending whatever else is going on. For example, if a student, there was a case in Vancouver, a student sat at the wall and the access point was behind it on the other side, so nobody could see it, but it was at that level. And this girl had a 40,000 microwatts per square meter exposure, which was absolutely unnecessary if this access point would have. And she was injured. She got very sick, and they had a heck of a time finding out what it was and removing her from this exposure. She was sitting in this place all day long. And so she had the highest exposure, and then as you go across the room, those students would have, it would be below 1,000 at the other side of the classroom. But the meters right around the access point can cause a lot of exposure.
So therefore, we have the placement of these access points being a critical factor, which we
Yes.
need to consider. And then the precautionary level of 1,000 microwatts per square meter as an ambient level is something that we can consider as well. We have our health and safety mandate as trustees to consider this for both our employees and for the students too. So I know that I omitted iPads in my motion, so at some point I'd like to make an amendment to that. But could you make a comment about cell phones in our schools, what levels? I know that you've mentioned it, but I can't remember. I think it's quite a strong source of EMF.
Yes, that is when the cell phones are being used. And then again, testing could be done to show the students how much it does in standby. It depends on how the phone is set up. If it's a very standard regular phone, even if it's in standby, the beacon signal would just be every few minutes or every 20 minutes. If you have a modern smartphone with 6, 7, 8 transmitters in it and all of them are activated and it's set to download emails all the time, then you have 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 cloud around you when you have it in your pocket all the time. So it really depends how the device is used and how you set it up.
So if we had a meter to monitor the levels, would that meter be able to monitor that multiple effect of iPhones as well as iPads and routers and access points?
Yes,
Thank you.
and it would be a great teaching tool to teach the kids about the electromagnetic spectrum, so they can make safer choices.
Thank you very much. Well, kudos to all who presented. It's a beautifully accessible presentation. I've read a lot of research, and some of it is really hard to understand because I'm not a physicist. So everything presented tonight is very understandable. Thank you so much for that. Accommodations to everybody. I want to say that a number of years ago, I wanted to go wireless like all my friends and be special and up to date and sophisticated. And when I had a computer tech person who does a lot of business applications in Victoria come to my home, because I can't do these things myself, he said, get that router off your desk, don't go wireless, do hardwired. This is a person who does, as I said, a lot of business applications. He can't avoid having to install wireless because people request it. But he said if you don't have to, don't do it. So I'm wired at home. I just want to say to Dr. Blank that your papers have been among the most accessible scientific papers that I've read, and thank you so much. Thank you, Katerina and Carrie, your book has been very helpful. Thank you all for being here tonight, and I don't know enough to ask any questions that I don't have answers for now.
Trustee Laurie Hanover?
Did you want to?
No, I think we'll look for questions.
I thought Kevin was going to respond to that. She's going to.
Trustee Laurie Hanover?
Yes, thank you to all of the presenters as well. You know, as I've tried to go through and try to make sense of it, and I know when I was a trustee in Saanich, we did use a precautionary approach, especially in the elementary school and with the elementary schools. And just because there was so much pro and con against it, and we really felt, let's be safe all the way through. And so I find it, you know, it's makes it really difficult because there is so much out there, and the whole idea of the Health Canada safety code being at 6, and yet that's sort of what we're bound by in Canada to be able to use as sort of that safe number. But I wondered about whether you guys knew or if there was any schools that possibly have a policy in regards to monitoring rather peak levels, and in terms of the near field, the proximity of using devices to their bodies. I just wondered if you guys knew of any schools out there that had policies in relationship to that?
Yes, they're not only schools that have adopted the precautionary principle, but I have a list, and you have lots of paper, I'm sure, but there are hundreds of organizations who are school districts, governments, the Israeli government, the French government, the Indian government. So if you were to take a stand here adopting the precautionary principle to integrate these safer tech solutions, you would not be going out on a limb. In fact, you'd be a lot less out on a limb than you are right now, to tell you the truth. Because honestly, when people like myself express concerns, always what comes back with the official response is the levels of exposure are well within Canada's Safety Code 6. And as Dr. Blank, who was one of the authors of the Bioinitiative report, has pointed out, and we'd like to leave this with you, Canada's Safety Code 6 is totally irrelevant to Wi-Fi exposure. So I would also encourage you to look at your legal coverage, because there is enough evidence now. As I said, the World Health Organization is equivocating its position, and within 5 years I predict that there will be class action suits because the number of electrosensitive children and staff is increasing dramatically, and this is preventable. So I leave you with the question that we asked at the beginning: why not use the safer options, to have the technology, to have the access? And to what Mr. Ferris was saying, I would encourage all of you, when you go home tonight, power off your wireless router and just do your own test at home and see if you sleep better. Because the Wi-Fi affects sleep, it affects the production of melatonin, and so we encourage you to use some of these techniques yourself as well.
Well, you would have to turn off the cordless phone as well. But there are here in BC and in Ontario, I believe, which decided to go wired and not use wireless at all. And I've been involved this year for the collaborative of high-performance schools in North America. This is kind of the healthy schools building standard, like LEED for government buildings. And for the first time, we've introduced low EMF guidelines. So my offer to the school district of Victoria is to work together with you to write best practice guidelines for your school district.
Yes, so thank you for that, Katharina, because, you know, I guess that was sort of my question. I know that there are a lot of, you know, a lot of policies that are in place in terms of the precautionary principle, but what I wondered about is, are there policies that actually cover the monitoring, like, that districts have to monitor the router peak levels, and in terms of how children should be holding those devices? Do you know if there are specific policies that actually address some of those issues when they're dealing with wireless technology?
Well, I was talking to the head of the radiation protection branch in BC here today exactly on this topic, and he promised me to get back to me. He put someone on it to look if there's any scientific data on it yet. The numbers I provided him with, he was quite startled. And so, yes, we have enough numbers to write up those guidelines.
My thank yous as well to the presenters for their information and for being here this evening. And just a point of order that while the trustees take questions, if there's members of the audience that want to ask questions, this is their opportunity as well. So I want to make sure that people in the audience know that this is an interactive meeting. Thank you.
A quick point, Winlaw School has won an agreement with the school district. Winlaw is, I believe in the Kootenays. Winlaw School has won an agreement from their school district to keep all Wi-Fi routers turned off at present, even though it was installed. So those parents are feeling very good about the safety of their children, and that's a BC school that hasn't enshrined that in policy, but it's a local school action.
Caribou Christian School, North Caribou Christian School has hardwired their entire school as well.
Rob, you had your hand up?
Yes, I think my original question has already been addressed. But one thing I was wondering about, just with talking about sort of radiation levels, could you tell me, just for frame of reference, what the kind of routers that are in common use? And I've heard reference to an industrial router or industrial style router versus presumably an at-home off-the-shelf one. And with respect to, say, dissemination throughout a school, are there routers out there that exist that can operate within the 1,000 microwatts per square meter level that you were referring to?
And any such system can be set up this way. It's just a question whether it's technologically advanced enough to do it all in the software programming, or if you have to use external shielding as well. The industrial strings comes from the different frequency bands that are used. There's 2.4 and then a couple in the 5 gigahertz range. And because the 5 gigahertz range has a heck of a time getting through walls, so they are allowed to use 200 milliwatt power levels, and the 2.4 gigahertz would be at 100 milliwatt power levels. And so that's why there are different levels. But often, all of the transmitters are in an access point these days, so that the laptops can use whatever is best to establish the connection. But for a school environment, you can make a choice which one to choose, and to have a policy about which wireless devices the students are allowed to use during class time. That's what it is about. You can, like a cell tower, you can have 4 or 6 different providers all in the same spot. That's much more radiation, even though if you had only 2, it would be much less exposure for everybody concerned. It's just you would have less choice for a provider. But for a single school, You can design spaces where there's no exposure, and you can put wherever you use the technology, cluster it in a certain area. Where the auditorium is, you can have switches when to actually activate it and when it's not being used to deactivate it easily. It's really the planning stage to design it properly. And even if everything is already in place, you look at what components you got and you see what the levels are and how you can use it more smartly. As far as exposure levels go, in the IR monograph that describes why this type of radiation was classified as possibly carcinogenic. It also has a page on Wi-Fi radiation for immediate close-up, like 1 to 3 feet from the actual device of a laptop, or an access point. It gives 100 to 200,000 microwatts per square meter. And there are a couple of countries in the world where compared to the 10 million for safety code 6, this particular number would be certainly below 100,000, and a few even say below 24,000. And so that's why if you have an iPad at 1 or 2 feet distance, that can make a huge difference compared to having it right on your thigh, close to the reproductive organs. Every single inch counts. And especially Wi-Fi radiation, looked it up today, 2.4 gigahertz. The kidneys are pretty close in the lab. It absorbs that type of radiation especially.
If I could, Olivia, the blue shirt.
Yes,
You could just give us your name for the minutes.
Carol Brown.
Thank you.
As a teacher and a member of a teacher in the district and a member of our health and safety committee at my school, I don't have a question, I just have a comment, and that's that I hope that in your deliberations and your decision making that you make a wise decision for the health and safety of our students and our staff, and I trust that you will.
Thank you. And I have a hand over there, but I can't see anybody. So if you could just stand up and say your name, please.
Yes, my name is Vasana Stoljarich, and I'm just wondering, since radiation is accumulative in the body, I just worry a bit because I know what human incompetence, or we get distracted and the children are doing this and they're using this even safely. It's never going to be a perfect fit. And if you're going to try and use an iPad, who can see it at this distance where it's safe? So I just worry about it working as it theoretically could. So I choose, the hardwired situation over a Wi-Fi situation just because of the accumulation. Thank you.
Thank you. The gentleman in the green shirt.
Thank you. My name is Clint Malone, and I also want to thank the presenters this evening for it. And I think the idea of a physics assignment is wonderful. It's going to be a very good assignment. You laid out a case that you believe that Wi-Fi poses a health hazard, but yet Health Canada, the Vancouver Island Health Authority, the BC Ministry of Health, the Alberta Ministry of Health, the Ontario Ministry of Health, organizations that I would consider to be very credible sources of health information in our society, say that this technology is safe. So my question, I guess, is as scientists and as health professionals yourself, why have you not been able to convince these public health organizations that this is a threat?
It's very simple. Science the way we do it today is, in order to issue a threshold level, you have to have full explanation of the mechanism. You can observe the effects, but as long as you cannot fully explain it, and most of the scientists agree on the mechanism, they won't set the threshold. The already back in 1996 or so, the first ICNIRP guideline explained everything about the thermal thresholds, and they can explain how that works. And as far as this non-thermal goes, they said the explanation is missing. There are quite a few hypotheses out there, but the scientists haven't agreed on it yet. That's why we don't have this threshold. And don't forget, I called them today, and they couldn't give me any answer. And Health Canada states that that no precautionary measures are required because the transmitters would always be that far away. Well, that's not the case with the Wi-Fi network in schools. And they haven't replied to me yet.
I think probably the best answer is for you to look at the book called Doubt is Their Product by someone called David Michaels, who was a member of the, I think he had a government position in the United States, and so he's pretty high up in trustable circles. He lays out the case of what happened with tobacco. Tobacco is not a bad metaphor, or should I even say simile. I think it's pretty much the same sort of thing. A lot of evidence of damage occurred over a long period of time. And people say, well, we don't know what's happening. We don't know what's happening. Something is happening, but we don't know what's happening. Mechanism is, I don't know, it's not the answer. I mean, it's not a question. The point is that you don't have to know the mechanism when danger occurs. I mean, you can see DNA damage being done. Do you have to know the mechanism when you're trying to avoid DNA damage? And they did know the mechanisms. There were mechanisms. I focused on DNA damage because I think that is a real peril that we are not very conscious of. It's cumulative and it's occurring all the time. And as a species, we ought to all worry about it. There's no organization that's thinking about it, but you know, man is evolving, and the thing is, we want to somehow protect whatever we've been able to gain through evolution and not lose it to this kind of randomness that would result from an accumulation of mutations. I don't think we're near that, so I don't want to raise this gloom and doom idea. But the fact of the matter is, we do know from the very beginning, the first observation that occurred with radar was that there was a leak of the brain barrier, the blood-brain barrier. Our brain is very well protected. We're surrounded by the cranium, which is a hard bone, but the brain floats. There's a cerebrospinal fluid that keeps the brain floating. And that's why, although you get concussion damage, which is now in the headlines that we're all familiar with, the fact of the matter is most of it is avoided because the brain is very well protected. Well, that fluid that is bathing the brain is very carefully regulated by the body. There are membranes that protect it and will allow only certain things through so that you got a kind of a perfect environment for it. Well, the guy who measured this found that the blood-brain barrier is penetrated with a relatively short exposure of relatively simple, and this was back in I think 1973. Alan Fry did that. He was told to stop working. And the fact of the matter is, if you need a mechanism for what might cause brain damage or what might cause people to start feeling that they can't sleep well, that is a pretty good one. So you've got that melatonin, you've got the blood-brain barrier hypothesis. Melatonin is another one that we know about. When we know that it's been measured time and time again, people who are exposed to EMF, this is low frequency, RF frequency, their melatonin production stops. Maybe not dead stop, but the melatonin production goes down. Melatonin is absolutely essential for regulating our cycles. That is our sleep-wake cycles. And people who get their sleep-wake cycles upset, they go through a whole bunch of problems. I mean, there are psychological problems, there are health problems associated with improper sleeping, and even improper functioning of various systems in the body, because the body is coordinated. When we sleep, we don't do our digestion. It's not going on. That's the time when the body does a lot of repair. The DNA damage that I talked about is largely repaired during the sleep cycle. And if you lose your sleep cycle, you're losing a lot of this. So we do know mechanisms. And the mechanisms had been known for a long time. I mentioned 1973. That was the first one with the blood-brain barrier. This guy who worked for Alan Fry, he's not even mentioned in most cases, but the fact is he discovered also something called microwave click. The fact is that when people turn on a microwave, and this was done when the early research on radar, they suddenly heard something going on in their ears, a kind of click. I'm not quite sure what it sounds like. I've never listened for it myself. But the fact of the matter is that you could turn something on at a relatively low level, being a fair distance from something should have alerted you to the fact that there's a biological response occurring somewhere in the body at such a low level. So, and that's understood, that somehow hair cells that are responsible for hearing. So those are two examples that are known. And the other things, I think the stress response, which is the research that we were doing at Columbia University, that I think is pretty well understood because we've been able to find a piece of DNA that reacts specifically with EMF. And we can take that piece of DNA out and attach it to another piece of DNA that has the code for a different protein and not a stress protein. And we've done this in 2 cases, and we are able to turn on the other proteins with a magnetic signal. So I think we know the mechanism of what's turning on the DNA.
Well, thank
Health
you.
Canada doesn't know how to read if they don't follow these papers because it's not one obscure paper in an obscure journal. It's been well publicized and replicated. Sorry to take so long.
No, that's okay. No. It's all good information. And as I said before, this is not the end of the conversation on this topic for us. So I really, really appreciate all of the presenters this evening. It's been a lot of really good information for us.
And I would just like to, I appreciate your question very much, and I had exactly the same questions when I got involved in this field several years ago. How could all these health authorities be wrong? I mean, and one of the things
That's exactly what you're saying. The health authorities are all wrong and
Well,
not
yes,
acting in the
they
best
are wrong.
interest
But
of.
They're not experts.
I said my question before I learned more about this, but I'll just give you an example. Dr. Blank came with me to a meeting with Dr. Perry Kendall. Dr. Blank presented his research. He explained to Dr. Kendall that he published 200 papers on this. Dr. Kendall had his resume, said your credentials are certainly impeccable. Dr. Blank presented his evidence of lab work, biological effects that he's seen from Wi-Fi and levels much lower than Wi-Fi. And not too long after that, Dr. Kendall was still saying there's no clear evidence of harm.
Well,
So
I think we've heard the question and the answer, so I'm going to call it at that point in time. So again, I really, really appreciate all the presentations this evening. It's not the end of the discussion because the Wi-Fi committee is still going away and a lot of the trustees are involved in that. And we'll be coming back to the board at committee level a couple of more times. So thank you very much. And thank you to the audience for coming in and hearing that as well and listening to the questions. And we're going to move on to our next agenda item. So thank you.